Hello and welcome to the GUEAST Festival of Central and Eastern European Film 2020. It's only online this year, but we are very happy that we can have the film talks and have the program, our competition, online for you to watch. I'm very happy that Karolis is here with me, Karolis Kaupinis. He is the director of Nova Lithuania, one of 16 films in our main competition. Very nice to meet you, even though in this way.
Nice to meet you, Jan, as well.
Thanks for taking the time and that we can have this talk about your film that has been shown on very many festivals. Even in the past year, you had your premiere in Karlovy Vary 2019. The film has won numerous prizes and also won from our jury. So I can congratulate you on this way, at least some months later, on the prize of the city of Wiesbaden for Best Director.
Thanks again. It was a big pleasure and unsuspected thing to get it, actually.
So to get to your film, Nova Lithuania is a title. The film is set in 1938. So we are in the time between two wars, and it's the 20th anniversary of the, at that time, young state of Lithuania. And it's already, again, in danger of losing its independence. So it's a very tricky situation. How come that you choose this event, this historic setting for your first feature film? It's your debut film.
I did not really think about whether it's a first or not. I just usually have topics or I know stories that I collect, gather, and then I let the time to check them whether they are worth making. Mm-hmm. And in this particular case, it was the main figure. I mean, the real person, this geographer who truly existed, according to whom I made the main character of the film. I knew him or the story of his for years, and the deeper I dwelled into that story, the more universal it seemed to me. I mean, universal not only audience-wise, but also the fact that he's from a particular period of time, as you say, but I don't really perceive time as a linear thing, I think it's pretty circular. Therefore, pieces of time that are more distant from our times might be actually closer to our times than something later. And for what I see and what's surrounding us lately, and by lately I probably mean few last years, all around world politics, somehow it becomes very, very similar to 1930s, and we should not perceive it literally. I mean, by exact same names, same states, and something, but the tension that this feeling of a possible upheaval is something that was pretty vivid for me in last years, and that's why I finally concentrated on this character who also has a kind of a feeling and also a certain solution to it.
Yeah, let's just stay for a second at your main character. So he's based on the real person, Kazis Pakštas, and yes. He had this kind of absurd or even weird sounding idea of a backup Lithuania. That's, I think, where your film title comes from too. You changed all the names in your story, but it's still based on this historic events, and it's really weird to know that this kind of plans really existed at that time. So how did you come across this very, very absurd story? And is it well known in Lithuania, or is it something that was like under the radar for a long time?
Something that is known in Lithuania is a theater play called Madagascar. And it's been written by Lithuanian playwright Marius Ivaškevičius. And in my case, I got to know the play years ago. Most of the people, I would say, in Lithuania got to know the real person through this play, because before it, the character was known probably only to certain circle of historians and people who were interested in that particular period. But in a play, the character is portrayed almost as a joke, because pakstas and pokštas, which means joke in Lithuanian, is just a difference of one letter in reality. So basically, I started reading what he actually meant with this idea and what also his life circumstances were at that period of time. And then strangely, things that you find happening in real life are as surreal as they are in his ideas. I mean, therefore, I decided to make this period piece and base it on let's say family situation and historical realities to get closer to what actually happened. But at the same time, not to limit myself to what happened, because this clash between fiction and authenticity is always, when you meet it, I think you need to choose fiction afterwards.
Yeah, you transformed this real person, this historic person, into your protagonist, Felixas, and
Yes.
and he is portrayed, as you said, in I think two main areas of his life. The one is I think his academic job, and also he's going into politics in some way with his ideas, and the other is his private life, and I think. It is very contradictory if you see him, as he is very profound in his ideas, but he cannot even, well, if you excuse this idiom, he's not the man of his own house. So was this something that was very interesting for you, to develop a character who is in such difficult situations at home, but has these big plans for his whole country?
That's also coming from real life, in a sense that those two situations, I mean, speaking about the general context and his family context, they just mirrored each other. It seemed that he met same problems on large scale and on a small scale inside his house. That was the result of my research, as deep as I could get. And therefore, basically this parallel, although it might even seem too obvious, was probably the most authentic thing that I took from reality. Therefore, I did not want to leave this backbone of the story aside. And yes, indeed, the helplessness of it is probably even more visible in the family life than on a large scale. But the dilemma into which the character and the real person was basically pushed was something that interested me the most, probably. So I decided to leave it as a backbone on a film.
Yeah, I think what is shown also in your overall style of the film, it is called in the Academy format, so it's 4:3. It's in black and white, so I think it's good reflecting the historical aspects, but also it really underlines this pressure that I think Lithuania as a whole country was getting or was in at this time. But also of the main character. He's always like, he has no space to move. Was this idea of the visual style there at the beginning, or was it something that you developed with your cameraman, with your crew?
We kind of developed it accordingly. I mean, the biggest problem to solve while making this film is let's say lack of authentic locations where we could use as little art design as possible. And therefore, while location scouting, there is a certain wave of interwar modernist architecture in the interim capital of Lithuania, Kaunas, at that time. it has a specific tone, and also the architectural forms, the minimalism of it somehow dictates the tone of cinematography. But usually you can, let's say we're in a room, so we can have two angles in that room, or we can have just a single wall that is available for us with little intrusion from art design, having in mind the limited budget of the film. Therefore, somehow this static cinematography was already something that was dictated by circumstances, and then we needed to turn it into. Finally, I started seeing that the whole of the story, the emptiness of the country, what he says to be one of the main reasons for the possible fulfillment, is already in the same structure, cinematographic structure. So finally, we found a Lithuanian photographer who was very active in the last years of the interwar republic. And basically his works became for us the key of how this film should be shot, because he shot it, his works where they have a format of 1:1. That's basically a rectangular shape, and certain shots in the film are exact copies of his works. For example, the initial shot of the film where you see the president giving a speech for army cadets.
This is not really a question, just I want to say that I really love the production design of this film. Felixas is a collector of many African maybe trophies, and there is this room. First of all, at first it's in his own house, and I think he has to move all of it because of the mother of his wife, who comes to visit, and he puts all of his stuff in the university, and it is also a very small room, and it's filled with this stuff. I think that again is it's some kind of fulfillment he wishes for his collection, for what he has found, what he has experienced, and there's no space for it either. So this is something that really comes back to us and comes back in the film in, I think, very each aspect you see it.
It's nice you notice it. As well, I had another idea that, it's the time we are talking about, it's still a colonial time where mostly this idea about exotic paradise somewhere where you can escape your problems and everything. They usually have in European mind, they are materialized in certain items that you bring back home just to have this atmosphere. And in a way, I somehow wanted it to be seen, besides the fact that I had actual photos where he had certain rooms filled with that with this memorabilia that he brought from his travels abroad.
So I really think that is a very pity for our audience, but this is a movie that really, I think, works best on the big screen. You had kind of the luck that you had a real cinema audience in Lithuania. I think the first cinemas had a movie in June. So there was, I think, some kind of relief in the Corona situation like here. How were the reactions of the local audiences?
Different than international audiences, because that's, when international audience watch this film, they don't really usually know all the historical subtleties and these characters. For them, they are all fictional characters and a fictional story. But in Lithuania, of course, people have certain basic knowledge of that time, of that period. So there is a lot of questioning whether this or that was like that as it is in a film. A lot of that comparison to reality, how much of reality is there and how much is fictionalized, which was constantly the question of the audiences, and maybe also because of the fact that there is not a big variety of period pieces of that time in Lithuania. So they are different. Let's say from country to country it differs what people notice and where people pay attention. Let's say when we were showing this film in Cairo in Egypt, most of the audience were interested whether they actually overthrew the president or not, because the film itself is like 500 meters from Tahrir Square, you know, and generally the emotion which is attached to the context where you are watching this film is also portrayed on screen by the audience. So yeah, Lithuanian audience watch it as a piece of their own history more than people abroad.
Oh, that's very interesting, because I think there are some scenes, and I think one, maybe it's the last line of the president. It's one of the shots in his car in the back seat where he reads over one of his speeches, and it's when the state capital was given back to Lithuania, but also it's some kind of intrusion. So Lithuania is invaded at that time, and he says, I think. He does not want to tell that. He does not want to say that a Russian army is invading the country, but so not to kill the mood. I think it was at least what was in the subtitling, and I think this was or this is a quote that is striking for me. Not only if you look at like President Trump, who knows about the effect of coronavirus, but he does not tell the masses, the people, because he thinks, I don't want to make them panic. So it's really, like you said in the beginning, it is a period picture, it is a historic film, but there are many aspects that are still relevant at our time, and you can watch it in both ways. And I think this is a really big accomplishment for this film.
I had an idea to make a film about such a character in nowadays. I mean, such a character as this geographer. But I think that paradoxically, the fact that we as audience have this time distance, from certain angle, we look at these people as if we are not them, you know. So these are people dressed in costumes of 1930s, and all this art design makes this period a bit distant. But strangely, when you see the same things happening at the same time, then you notice them better in today. Therefore, somehow it becomes that the past explains present better than present, you know. And that's what I mostly like about period pieces, and if they are successful period pieces, because I think there is also a difference between what we call a historical film and period film. Therefore, so often in historical films, things are being portrayed that we already take for granted as historical symbols, let's say wars or something. But I'm always more interested in the chapters of the book where you have reasons for things that happen later. So a little bit before or a little bit after what's known as a historically important things are, I think, what cinema might help to reveal, and maybe likewise at least a little bit let us understand why we live in the times like we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the times like these, how can you already tell us about what your next project will be like?
The next projects, we have year 1991. This time, just a little bit after the events. 1991, there was an unsuccessful Soviet coup in Lithuania when the collapsing Soviet Union tried to take the power back. And what they managed to do, they managed to take over the broadcasts of Lithuanian television, but did not manage to overthrow the parliament. And there was this strange gap of 9 months when the country was in this limbo situation where two TVs existed. One was propaganda channel, hardcore propaganda. Another was like so-called free television. but the free television did not have the building and all the infrastructure that to work with. So we are in this situation, and we have a hunger strike of the journalists of the TV, and basically these people close themselves in an isolated space in a hunger strike cabin in order to liberate themselves. Something that we are experiencing probably today, closing ourselves in a confined spaces so that we can understand what it is all about and what's important and what's not.
Well, we were really looking forward to watch the next feature of you too. So maybe then, at least, we had a time to meet again in Wiesbaden. Thank you very much for this talk, for your insights in this film production, and to our audience, I would very, very like to recommend Nova Lithuania to watch on Go East X-Ground On Demand. There are also the other films of the competition, and there you will have the chance to vote for your favorite film for the first Go East Audience Award, the last prize we will give out this year.